it's really worth noting that your career, improbable in so many ways, because just on Andy Griffith alone, you could have spent the rest of your life going to setting up a card table and going to conventions and having that amazing experience. And it's so funny because I get to interview so many terrific actors, talking to Walton Goggins the other day, talking to Billy Bob Thornton. Both of them cite that show, the Andy Griffith Show, as being seminal for them.
Amazing.
And I think I understand it because it's character comedy. Not afraid of a long pause.
Right.
Not afraid of, and I was saying there are scenes outside the courthouse or in the barbershop that feel like waiting for Godot. And beautiful. Like it really does hold up.
Well, it's, it was so much a function of a kind of singular creative voice. Not that Andy wrote, he wasn't didn't have a producer credit, but it was his show. It was tailored to his sensibility. And Sheldon Leonard, who was the executive producer and very active on the show, was this old character actor who had become this incredible television producer who had great success with Danny Thomas and Van Dyke and the Andy Griffith Show. And for a moment, he was like the comedy producer, but he was there all the time, and they were always stressing character. And Andy used to kill jokes if they were too broad. And he just kept saying the South is plenty funny on its own, without having to reach for it and do slapstick and stuff, like he didn't like Petticoat Junction and not Hillbilly Elegy. That's a movie I directed. He didn't like Beverly Hillbillies. Beverly Hillbillies.
Right.
And because they were doing sketch basically.
Yes.
And
high concept.
He didn't like Little Abner.
Right.
And so as a result, I mean, I don't know that there have been other single camera shows that kind of held that tone. Maybe Real McCoy's a little bit, but they didn't have Don Knotts.
Yes.
And
I was remarking recently that it's the ability to have, two characters just talking about, oh, it's a nice day.
Well, those bits were usually when the show was short.
Yes.
And they would come, so we would shoot Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, single camera, rehearse read on Thursdays, rehearse Fridays, shoot Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And several times, these scenes that you're, the kinds that you're citing, usually between Don and Andy. I remember vividly Aaron Rubin, our showrunner, coming down and talking to Andy, and then Andy he always called Don Jesse. Yeah. And he would say, Jesse, we're short. Come on. And at the very last thing of the end of the Wednesday night shoot would be the two of them, and they would have just talked about it a little bit, and they'd wind up doing one of these scenes.
And they're amazing, and it's just they're I love watching them because they're just playing the silences, and it's so well. And of course, you've got these two consummate, beautiful actors. They're just such great comedic actors, but just, oh boy, it's a nice day. Sure is, isn't it? Yep. Yep. You're watching it and you're thinking, I have this theory that comedy has been increasingly compressed to the point now that when any series starts, they have to start at the most dramatic moment, and then that turns out it's a flashback.
Right.
Because they can't start slowly. People can flip to another streaming platform too quickly.
Right.
So every show starts with main character has 5 bullet holes in them and is screaming, and then you cut to 2 weeks earlier. And I think they don't trust us that this is going somewhere. Right. And there's a lot of parallel editing and everything. And just the idea that one of the most popular shows in television history could often consist of people playing things in that pace.
And the fact that the show really does endure. I mean, it's actually on like all the time, and especially over COVID. I kept hearing from people that it was like a lifeline, for them. But here's the thing: how lucky was I to grow up in that situation where, in fact, the environment was set up for actors to not improvise, but participate, make suggestions, things like that. And even as a 6-year-old, I mean, my dad was having to read the lines at the read-through, and I would just kind of sit there at first. My father rants. But later, when I started to learn to read and so forth, I was in it. And I actually started occasionally making a suggestion, and it never went anywhere. Kind of pissed me off a little bit. In that first year. Yeah. And I will never forget it was the second episode of the second season, and I had turned 7, and we were rehearsing this scene where I was supposed to come into the courthouse, and Otis was over here, and Andy was there, and Don was somewhere else. And I came in, and I was supposed to say, "Hey, Pa, something, whatever the line was." And then I sort of stopped, and the director, Bob Sweeney, said, "What is it, Ronnie?" And I said, "Well, I don't think a kid would say it that way."
Oh.
And he said, "Well, how do you think a kid would say it?" I don't remember what the line was, but I pitched my little little fix on it, and he said, "Okay, good, yeah, do it that way." And it was just like I was a part of it. I just felt this surge of being involved in something. Yeah. And Andy from across said, "What are you grinning at, youngin'?" And I said, "What's the first idea of mine you've taken?" And he gave it the proper beat, and he said, "Well, it was the first one that was any damn good. Now let's rehearse the scene."
To a 7-year-old.
But you know what's also nice? If you look at the history of situation comedies, especially usually and increasingly so through the 70s and 80s and 90s, the kid's role was to say something overly sophisticated and wise-assy that a kid would never say.
Right.
So that's where you get, all these, the Gary Coleman character that's just like, well, if you ask me, sounds like this guy's paying too many taxes. And
I love that episode.
I know. I agree with him. I think we are paying too many taxes. But, and what I think really holds up well is your character is a real boy. You're playing the reality of the situations. You're not saying, "No, let me get this straight. Otis is drunk again? Sounds like someone needs rehab." And like winking at the camera, which by the way would have been a great line. But
okay. This is something that means a lot to me, and I didn't know anything about it at the time, but later Andy told me this. So when we were doing a revival, Return to Mayberry, or one of those interview sort of specials or something, Andy told me this, that in that very first season, the first episode, that my dad was an actor.
Yep.
Not a famous actor, but he was professional and working. Took it upon himself to just go up quietly to Andy at one point and say, "Now I see they're writing Opie kind of the way they write the Rusty Hamer character on Danny Thomas." And like so many shows where he's a wise ass.
Yeah.
And he said that, Ronnie can do that and everything, but what if he actually respected his father? And Andy thought about it and told me years later that he went back to the writers and said, let's write Andy Opie like Ronnie rants.
Oh, wow.
And and let's try that. And they went for it.
Yeah. Well, it stands out. It's interesting because, again, we've been fed a steady diet of everyone hates dad. Dad's an idiot.
Right.
And the kid
knows it.
And the kid knows it and is always letting him know it. And it got amped up, sometimes stretched out in kind of a meta way, like on Married with Children, where or sometimes The Simpsons, where they're actively plotting their father's death.
But it does make me laugh. It's effective.
No, it's really funny, and I think the right way to go. My point is, your dad was wrong, and I don't think you should be here.